Hello, everyone. Welcome to the OpenNTF Open Mic Series with HCL. I'm David Hoblowitz, and I'm one of the board members of OpenNTF, and I will be your host for today. I'd also like to call out our other board members that are here today, Roberto Bocadaro and our chairman, Graham Akers, are both here today. So thank you guys for being in there. And first, I'll start off with just a little bit of the logistics. We will be recording this, so if you don't want to be on camera or you don't want to have your voice recorded, then make sure that you're not talking and anything like that. As we're online, I don't need to tell you where the bathrooms are. You know where they are. For the question and answer portion, we ask that you limit your questions to a single question at a time, and you can ask a follow-up question for clarity, but in general, stick to the one question at a time and be brief and refrain from getting into any long comments or anything like that. Yes, if you want to ask your question yourself as opposed to just typing it in, then in your question, be sure to include that you'd like to ask your question, and then we can turn on your mic when we go to that question. And a disclaimer that HCL may not have an immediate answer to your question, but we do hope to have the answers to your questions that you've made. And the beautiful part is, for those of you who ask the questions in advance, through our website or through the email address, your questions will have a better chance of getting a solid answer. So I want to introduce you today our panelist and our panelist who will introduce his team. And that is Doug Conmy, the development engineering lead for HCL Nomad. So Doug, have at it.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So my name is Doug Conmy. I've been working on Notes and Domino for a long while. Go back all the way to version 2.1 in 1991. Most recently, I'm lead architect for our Nomad family of clients, and I'm pretty excited with this technology and to share it with you today. I'd like to introduce my colleagues and team. We'll start with Bob Sielken. Bob?
Thanks, Doug. I'm Bob Sielken. I'm currently working on the Nomad for web browsers parts and leading some of the squads there, but there are many people involved besides just me doing that. Prior to working for HCL Nomad, I've been involved in HCL Traveler and the Verse clients that talk to Traveler and everything else. So if you've run into me before, it's probably in that context, and I'm still a consultant to that team. So between Traveler, the Verse clients, and Nomad are the main things I focus on now. And for further Nomad stuff, I will pass it over to Max.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Maxx Sutton. I'm a technical lead for HCL Nomad on iOS. And I've been working on Nomad for 7 years now. It's a pleasure to be here. Next, I'm going to introduce Jeremy Figgins.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jeremy Figgins. I'm the lead for Nomad Android, and I've been on the team now for 5 years. Before that, I was working on Verse Mobile, so I've got a long history here of working on these products. And with that, I'll pass it on to Dan.
Hi, my name is Dan Dumont. I've been working on the Notes Domino family of products for about 20 years now. Recently for Nomad, I've been involved in the Nomad server and the COM integration extension and plugin for Chrome. And David, back to you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We're gonna have Max do a quick presentation first. And
we do have the presentation. Sorry,
yes.
Answer
that question at the same time. So
Thank
go ahead and make
John.
Max the presenter.
Yeah, and this will help set some of the context for these questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi again, this is Max. So I know this is a Q&A session, but we thought it would be useful to set a common baseline here so that we can just jumpstart our conversation. So first we want to ask, what is HCL Nomad? So HCL Nomad is a lightweight client that runs your Domino applications wherever you are. Using HCL Nomad, you can run your Domino applications in your favorite web browser like Chrome, Edge, or Firefox, as well as on mobile on either Android or iOS. Since HCL Nomad is just an app, to install, your end user simply visits a web page, and because of this, there are also no real upgrade rollouts. Updates happen automatically for the end user, And best of all, if you already have a CCB license for Notes Domino, then you already have access to hey-hcl Nomad. Now let's talk about the Nomad Domino application profile and what Domino apps can you expect to run on Nomad. Our application profile is a subset of the Notes basic client. hey-hcl Nomad just works with support for app formula, Lotus script, offline replication, and much more. There is one caveat, and that is that we do not support Java. Because of this, we do recommend reviewing your Domino apps for Java use and consider replacing Java with another function within the Domino application profile. If you'd like to know more specifics around our limitations, please visit our limitations doc linked here via QR code. So the best part of hey-hcl Nomad is that it works wherever you work. hey-hcl Nomad for web browsers is platform agnostic, meaning you get the same great experience no matter if your workstation is using Windows, Mac OS, or Linux. And now because Nomad for Web has the designer experience, that means you can now run Designer on your MacBook, right? So it does this by running in your favorite web browser. We currently support Chrome, Firefox, and Edge. And if you're using Domino apps on the go, then we have you covered. hey-hcl Nomad Mobile runs on your Android or iOS, tablet or phone. And if you aren't using hey-hcl Nomad Mobile yet, I would ask you to please check us out in the respective app stores by scanning the QR codes on this slide. So why hey-hcl Nomad for web browsers? Because Nomad for web browsers gives you a lightweight Domino application experience in your browser. For your end user, it's as simple as visiting a web page. There are no plugins for general use and no installation managers. The client will even automatically take new updates deployed by the admin. It just works. If your business has a mixed deployment of desktop platforms, that's not a problem. We've got you covered, as hey-hcl Nomad for web browsers is platform agnostic and it delivers the same great experience on all those platforms. Just because Nomad for web browsers runs in your browser does not mean it has to always run online. Nomad supports local replication and offline use. Now, if you've been hesitant to deploy hey-hcl Nomad because you've been using Notes for a long time and you have a lot of user data baked into your Notes client, then I would recommend looking into Nomad Web Migration provided by PandaGen Marvel Client. It's really easy. Just let Marvel Client do the migration work for you. Nomad Web Migration is available to all users of Marvel Client, including Marvel Client Essentials users. So why hey-hcl Nomad for mobile? Because sometimes you need to work on the go. hey-hcl Nomad for mobile works on your mobile device and takes your Domino take your Domino applications out into the field using our supported local replication and offline use. hey-hcl Nomad for mobile expands what your Domino application can do. Utilize devices built-in GPS using the Lotus script class Notes GPS, and you can even utilize the device camera for capturing images or scanning in barcodes. And finally, if after this Q&A session you want to see more Nomad, then we recommend checking out our recent webinar, Unlocking the Power of hey-hcl Nomad, on YouTube. And with that, I will pass the mic back to you, David.
Thank you, Max. That was awesome. By the way, that recording that you're talking about there was made just last month, so it is fresh. That was your January presentation, if I recall. And while we're talking about it, if you're not, you should follow their YouTube channel because there are a lot of other presentations that you guys have put together that I think are very valuable. And I've gone in there. You even brought up a few things that I might be seeing some questions on about from your presentation. But first, because I already teed it up, I'm going to go ahead and ask that first question that I've got there. And that is, how simple is it to log on and access Domino applications for end users once configured?
That's a very good question. I'll take that if I'm allowed to share here. And I will start with just a general architecture description in order to try to get to the answer to the question. So I am definitely going to answer the question, but let me build up a little bit to that first. So the clients, and this is an architecture picture that's in our documentation, which we can put the link in the presentation later. And while it's showing the browser, so this is the Nomad for web browser on the left-hand side, it really can be any of the clients that are there, because the clients are all, in the end, talking NRPC between the client and the server. The only restriction is in the web browser, we're not allowed to talk over an NRP socket, so we have to do something, and so we wrap that in a WebSocket secure wrapper. And then we just need something in the middle, which is the WSS and HTTP proxy in the picture to handle the WSS to NRPC conversions back and forth. So basically just the client wraps it, sends it over, the NRPC goes to the back end, and the Nomad server can handle it and stuff like that. You can have the proxy be the Nomad server on Domino that's in the blue box, or you can have a different proxy in the middle. But because you have a proxy, that also gives you different authentication choices. So by default, you can just use NRPC traffic is going to be authenticated. So that will happen there, and that is the real secure layer that's in here. If you want to have the Nomad traffic secured otherwise, you can also authenticate at the HTTP level in the middle. But if you want to, you can pass the NRPC wrapped in WSS all the way to the Nomad server and let it handle it there. But if you do have a proxy in the middle, and that could either be the Nomad server on Domino, or it could be a generic proxy. It could also be safe links, and safe links could also be the WSS handling. So there are many different choices there, but because you have those choices, you then have the different options for authentication, such as you could do SAML. So if you wanted to have a SAML identity provider, you can have that set up, and the request will get redirected through your IDP and do the authentication for you. Most of that is just the client, be it the browser or the mobile devices, passing the data back and forth between the IDP and the Domino server in the back end and the proxy, because that is who is authenticating and has the shared relationships set up. You could also do Domino OIDC. So if you have OIDC set up instead of SAML, you can do that. Because the proxy is doing the HTTP traffic, you could set up basic authentication for that. You could do certificates for that if you wanted. You could also do multi-factor authentication and have a second code, those kind of things. So it can be very simple. The simplest case is just have Nomad server on Domino, which doesn't require you to do the HTTP traffic because there's no confidential information on that, and only does the NRPC, and it's very little. You just type in who you are and you keep going. If you want to put more layers and do other forms of authentication, such as having your identity provider that you already have set up for the rest of your organization, you may do that. And that just gives you a lot of different options. And then it should be easy for your end users. If they're used to single sign-on through your IDP, that should work. And everything should work fairly simply. It mostly depends on how your administrators want to set it up. But for the end user in the end, regardless of how many pieces are involved, the admin should have it set up correctly, and it should be very easy to just log in as you normally do to a web application. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I would just add that, we do have the concept of the Notes ID. And so for mobile, that Notes ID is always going to be present. You will either have to enter your password as the end user once you have the client configured in order to gain access to your Domino applications. You can also enable biometric authentication, so you can use your face or your Touch ID in order to unlock that Notes ID. And if you are configured through a Nomad server, then you also have the Nomad server authentication components that Bob just spoke to, where you will actually have to provide some sort of authentication with whatever has been set up there in the DMZ.
Cool. Wow. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, Max. And by the way, if you're wondering, this is what happens when you ask the question in advance, that you guys actually have a chance to give us a deep answer. So I appreciate that. And from that, I wanted to ask, because as we talk about, I like to get to the why. Let's start off with why Nomad. And that is, what is the sweet spot for Nomad? And when is it not really a suitable choice?
So as we talked to Max showed, Nomad is a very simple client for administrators to support, and we think it's a great option for our customers. But we do know there are some customers that are taking advantage of some of the things in the Notes client that are outside the what Nomad can support. So there are things in the standard client that aren't available in Nomad. We do document our limitations, and we have been slowly addressing some of them that aren't hard stop technical limitations. as we get customer feedback on things that are necessary for them in order to use Nomad. Bob or Max, you want to add to that?
I would just say that application experiences have been going to mobile and the web for a long time. And so, the main thing about Nomad for Web is that it mobilizes your Domino applications to go there. And a lot of users are getting very used to accessing their applications in the web. So, ACL, we're providing the capabilities for your end users to use the application where they likely want to use the application. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And I'm seeing a lot of questions about those browsers, even in the chat. So I'll jump to this question, and that is, obviously you can choose whichever browser you want to use as long as it's one of those three. Is there a favorite that you have that will behave the best? And along with that, where's Safari fit into this picture? Are we going to see that anytime soon?
I would say that to this point, certainly the Chromium-based browsers are the most popular. They're the most popular in the market. They're what people have used the most. And for a while, they had the Origin private file system, which allowed us to do the local replication in a performant manner. Mozilla has caught up on the Firefox on that front, so that has made the replication and everything else that now works on Firefox relatively equal. But of course, Firefox has a relatively smaller market share and doesn't do that kind of stuff. The key differentiation now, as far as maybe picking your favorite, would be the COM helper stuff, because if you are an environment that uses a lot of COM or integration things, then you need to use a browser that has the COM integration on Windows, of course, only. And right now that is just Chrome. Edge will be shortly thereafter. Firefox has a different architecture and therefore is not as easy to reuse that code. So if you need to use COM in your applications and get to local files on the operating system, which are restricted from the browser, then Chrome will then become your recommended or favorite. But if you're not using COM, or you're not running on Windows for sure, and you're not using COM because of that, then it really is just whichever browser is your personal preference. There's no real functional difference between them at that point.
I just want to add, because there was a question about Safari. Safari doesn't support the same level of web technology that Chrome and Firefox support. The Origin private file system that Bob talked about, as well as some PWA features that are necessary to make Nomad work.
So I think the point is, ask Apple when they're going to add all of that into Safari, and we'll gladly support it.
Apple has changed some of the technology that we run on, and so it has gotten closer to being able to run, but it's not to the point of the other three to be what we consider sufficient.
Okay, so that's put the ball back in their court. Very well, very good. And so I'm going to jump to the next question. Can you explain the difference between running Nomad server on the Domino server or on a SafeLinks server? What's the difference between the two?
That's a good question. So the Nomad server on the Domino server is a Domino add-in task that handles the proxying of the WebSocket, the secure WebSocket communications to servers behind the server, basically. And so any server that you want to talk to in your environment from the Nomad client, you type in the server name and it gets sent through that proxy to go talk to whatever server you want to talk to. You're not limited to only talking to the server that's hosting Nomad. You can also use SafeLinks you can use it in combination with Domino, with the Nomad server for Domino. And use it as sort of a proxy. And the main use case for SafeLinks has always been, it's a hardened front end that has a lot of security features. So you can do things like configure single sign-on and stuff like that, and let the SafeLinks handle authentication and then pass everything to the back end as authenticated traffic, but it happens at SafeLinks. For the customers that are configured that way and leverage it extensively, it might make more sense to put SameTime in front. Over time, we may transition more to people running the Nomad server on Domino, but safe links will always be a supported configuration in front of that for security related features.
Excellent. Very good. So I have a question that I received in advance, and I see it kind of popping up in a similar way online. So the question for this one is, Nomad seems like you have provided the means to essentially run multiple Notes clients with different users on the same computer. Can you speak to that? And in the chat as well, are there plans to make it possible to log in with different accounts on Nomad?
So I would say that that is an excellent feature and one that I'm very happy to have. But one thing that you want to be careful of is when you're using your browser has a file system associated with the origin, and every time you go to that page with a certain user, that's the only file system that Notes is going to be able to use. So to effectively leverage multiple users well within your browser, I would recommend making a browser profile for each of those users, so that the file system access doesn't get contaminated with another user's data. But it does work well, and it's awesome.
Okay. And how about for Nomad Mobile? That's the other half of that someone was asking.
Right. So we currently do not support logging in with different users on Nomad Mobile. Unfortunately, if you are using a device and you want to switch users, you do need to uninstall and reinstall the client. It's a fairly lightweight process, but I do understand that can be inconvenience for that use case. We do recommend going to AHA with this request, getting that voted up so that our product manager can see that.
Add in, yeah, I agree with Max. It's definitely AHA worthy. On Android, though, you do have the support for multiple accounts that are on most devices. So you could affect multiple accounts if you really wanted to by actually logging out of your Android account and logging in as a different user on the same device. So there's a hacky workaround if you really need it right away.
So there are two things that I think come up here. One is AHA, and if one of my cohorts could post in there the link to AHA where you can post your requests for enhancements. And the other was that there is another link that got shared here on a little more detail to the question, to the answer. All right, so moving on. Some of these can be pretty technical, and here's a pretty deep diving question. Can you call a LotusScript-based web service consumer from Nomad Web? Or do you have to use agents with the run-on server, as I see as a workaround? That asked by John Dalsgaard.
So I wasn't quite sure on the nuance of the LotusScript that he was asking. So if there are particular LotusScript things that aren't callable from Nomad, then yes, the workaround would be to do a run-on server for that. And if he's got more to share on that specific use case, I might be able to provide more information if I knew more.
Oh, cool. Thank you. And David, John, you posed the question. You're welcome to maybe put that into the questions again and get that more detail. We can come back to that.
Or anybody can always feel free to open up a support case, because then we can handle private data and all that kind of private data handling and look at your script exactly and see what it's doing and recreate it and see what it's doing and give you even more concrete feedback without sharing it with the whole world. So that's another option to get specific feedback on things like that too.
Excellent point, Bob. And by the way, that is a segue into that. If you have some specific questions or problems that you have, open a ticket. That is a great place for it. Here is a great place to get these questions that we can't get answered just by a support call, but rather more of the strategic questions, if you will. Here's a question that I have, also came from online in advance. And it's a bit lengthy, so bear with me. And it's talking about Nomad Mobile for Android. It may apply to all of them, but In this case, it's talking about attachments. Is it possible to attach multiple files/photos in a single operation? Basically selecting more than one file and attachment and doing them all at once. Currently, when I select a photo, I can attach only a single photo or file at a time, and then I have to repeat the process again and again. Or is there some deep architectural thing that might be preventing this?
Yeah, that sits kind of in between those two extremes. So it can't be done today, but there's really no technical reason why we couldn't make that happen. Android does support multi-select, so doing a multi-select on attachments is certainly possible. So yeah, this is definitely another one that would be a great entry on AHA, so we can get that prioritized.
Great. So Philip, if you're listening, get that posted on AHA.
John gave some clarity to his question. If you want to scroll to the top of the question.
He clarified that the loader script was calling a web service, which was using Java. And so Java is outside the Nomad profile, so that would have to be run on the server in order, because Nomad is not able to run that loader script.
Here's the short and simple one, hopefully, regarding the designer. What's the release status? As of which version will it be included? So designer in Nomad.
Sure, I just looked that up because I couldn't remember. So we first shipped that in 1.0.10. So that was 5 releases ago. We were just about to ship 1.15. And it's available as long as you have designer or admin access to a database, either local or remote. You can view it through designer, which will open a second window to show you the design elements.
That's a Nomad for web browsers. That's a Nomad for web browser statement. The designer
Yes.
is not available on the mobile clients.
And Doug, just to be clear, it's usually based on the most current designer for notes 12.02 or 14.0 right now. You're shipping one.
That's right. So we are currently 14.0 fixed pack 3 based, I believe. Or will be if I can't remember the timing on that. But
that's correct.
Great.
And right. And speaking of what version we're based on, we actually have that in the console in 1.15. We actually put that information just to be useful if anyone was interested. It's in the logs.
It's certainly anticipated. All right. On the next question. When will simple operations like go back, in quotes, be implemented on Nomad Mobile Android? Now it closes the app. Apparently there's maybe an AHA already posted on this.
Yeah, and I'll agree 100%. It's something that irritates me as well as the guy who's responsible for it. We do have a entry in our backlog to get that improved. We've got a design for it. It's just a matter of getting to that feature and getting it implemented. Even though it is planned at this point, it's still worthwhile to go to the AHA entry and vote that up. I know our product management looks at that really closely to figure out what is the next most important thing to do. So I'd encourage you to do that. But yeah, I 100% agree. It's compared to every other Android app where back just takes you back to where you were, it's very jarring when you press back and you're taken back to the home screen instead.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you for sharing our pain. I'm an Android user myself, so I can appreciate that one. All right. Moving to another question here. Oh, here's an interesting one. Would it be possible to get beta builds for testing in a local environment? We cannot upload our custom applications to the HCL environment.
We do have the HCL Sandbox, which is an environment that HCL hosts that allows you to sign up and get pre-release versions of the Nomad for web browsers and the Nomad server that you can run against in the sandbox. So this is kind of like you don't have to set it up, nice and easy for you way to test your apps in the containers with the current stuff. As an option with that, you have the option to upload your own applications to do that. The concern then, of course, is some people don't necessarily want to upload their applications to do that. But I wanted to clarify that you could always upload your application, but not have any of your personal data in it. So some customers have handled that by basically having empty applications, and then you can always create data in the sandbox and do the other kind of stuff like that. As far as making the Nomad server and Nomad for web browsers builds available outside of the sandbox for people to do that, and similar to an early access program or things like that, we have not seen enough of a use case to do that at this point, because there is certainly overhead in doing those kind of things, and we have set up so that we're releasing quite frequently. So the hope is either you can just basically test it as it comes out every 3 months for web browsers, but the mobile client ship like every month or month and a half. So you're seeing things very quickly and on a regular basis. And so the lead time is not very much regardless. But if not, maybe you could upload the stuff to the sandbox, just don't have any of your personal data in there, but your applications are there. It is scoped to only your company. The other companies can't see any of your information. So, but I understand that legal can get involved there. So those are really the choices, and we're not really looking to make the web builds available outside of the release cycles.
Thank you, Bob. It really does emphasize, too, how far we've come from the old, oh, we're going to have another version out 2 years from now or anything like that. Now the cycle is so much faster. All right, next question. Can you use COM integration to Word and Excel? I do now know if this customer uses OLE, but I doubt it. But for the completeness, ask about that as well. So I'm not sure I'm asking this question well. You did get this one in advance, so maybe you can jump in on this one. That is, can you use COM integration for Word and Excel?
So yeah, we've been shipping a beta for the COM integration, and if you download and install that, you should be able to make some pretty good progress in using COM with Excel or Word, or even some file handling endpoints. Really, any COM interface that gets exposed by the operating system can be accessed through this helper, like you can on the Notes client. There are some caveats that are mostly related to the file system that the browser gives us is not accessible from the file system on the computer. So we've introduced some new functions to make files, transfer files that are in the browser file system to the Windows file system so that they can be operated on with COM. We're going to be releasing the non-beta version of that with 1.0.15 soon. And there's going to be a bunch of help and examples and stuff like that up on our documentation site.
Great. So that was a good question to ask. Next question. Looking for an option to pre-configure the user workspace. So I don't have much of a question to that, but I think that you can understand what we're after. We're looking for, can we pre-configure that workspace when rolling out?
Yeah, so we recommend taking a look at Marvel Client. So Marvel Client comes embedded with Nomad. It's a great way to manage Nomad. One of the things that you can manage in the client is the workspace. So you can set exactly what desktop icons you want in the workspace, their order, and you can have that consistent across all of your clients for all your users using Marvel Client. So definitely would recommend looking at that.
Thank you, Max. And knowing that Marvel Client, there's a lot of that that's integrated into this, does that require additional licensing that we have to pay for from PanAgenda, or is that a part of the free parts that are included?
Well, I don't want to speak to the workspace actions because I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a big licensed guy. I will say, if you are already using your Notes client and you have your desktop already configured exactly the way that you want it to be, you can use Marvel Client web migration so that you can have all that data, including your workspace, migrated to the web, so that when you launch your web client configure, all that will already be there for you. And what's great about that is that the web migration action actually is available underneath the Essentials license, which is, sort of like this license that everyone has if you're up to date with Notes Domino. So that's a great option for folks.
Excellent. And that last little bit is exactly what I wanted to hear about, the Essentials being that free component that we already have access to with our license. Great. Well, let me look online here.
Just to be clear, David, that might be on the initial. That might be on the initial migration. They should consult the Pan Agenda site for if there's further control that the admin wants. So definitely look to Pan Agenda and see what's officially licensed.
Yeah, good point, actually, because yes, it's a one-time kind of, okay, we've moved it from my Notes client over to mobile, but what about those new users that you might be rolling out that never even had a Notes client? So good point of making the comparison there. All right, let me get back to my list of questions. Question is the Restyler product created so that it will be easier to make Nomad friendly, and in parentheses, mobile and pad friendly applications with it? I do recall that you were just showing off the Restyler in the webinar that you did last month, so maybe you can clarify on this question.
So right now, Restyle is not providing any changes to the application design so that it would be optimized for mobile. Mobile does bring challenges because it's a smaller form factor, and we do have features within Nomad on mobile that help users navigate their desktop applications on those smaller form factors. So right now, Restyle is just restyling the look and feel of an application, but it's not actually changing the design per se. Yeah, I think that's, it is an interesting question. It's something that I think that we want to look at. How do we make Domino applications better for mobile? And so that's definitely something that we talk about and are looking at.
I would add to that. That was a good answer, Max. But I would add to that Restyle is really about the look and feel of the applications. And Restyle runs. You can run on your Windows. You can run on Windows, or you can run it in the Nomad for web browsers. So you can kind of run it anywhere. And the app changes that you make are the look and feel, and so that applies everywhere as well. So if you're looking at it in the Notes client, it's going to be changed there. It's changed everywhere. And so it's more of a broad approach, not a Nomad specific, or certainly not a mobile for Nomad specific attempt or a feature.
Yeah, and I would just add that we do have features and functions that allow you to query that you're on a mobile device and the form factor, and you can make your app responsive to that. That's something you do manually. I would encourage you to take a look at Admin Central database, which has taken advantage of that and does respond differently on the different form factors.
Yeah, so specifically the app platform formula command, if you specify specific, I guess you will get all sorts of data about the client, and you'll be able to specify if it's iOS, web, Android, mobile, and make decisions based off of that.
All right. There was a follow-up question, or it goes hand in hand of the previous question, and that is there a way to save the Nomad workspace so to be able to retrieve it on different devices, sort of a roaming capability? And I think that the right response there is that the Marvel client may actually do just that. So yeah. Again, diving more into the Marvel client's aspect of this.
Right. So we already talked about web migration, which is a one-time migration of your data from the Notes client to your web client. Now, you may want to have that data then roam to your mobile devices. So there is a roaming action that is available in mobile client that will do that for you.
And so I will jump in.
Go right ahead.
All right. So we get lots of questions or confusions or whatever around the difference between Nomad federated login and Nomad shared login, and what they mean and what they're kind of doing. So as Max mentioned earlier, we do have the ID file. So the ID file is used for the NRPC and all the flows and the traditional stuff that the ID file is used for, and holding your keys and everything else like that. So there are two parts to it. One is getting the ID onto the mobile, into Nomad. And then the other one is once it gets there, how is it secured and how is it accessed after that? So The key is the Nomad federated login is similar to the Notes federated login, but it's not the same setup. So if you have the Notes federated login, it is not the same partnership. So make sure you have to do them both. That has been a mistake that people have fallen into. And that is just for getting the ID from the ID vault. So you can get it from the ID vault normally either via the ID password or from the federated login. Once you have the ID, you need to store it somewhere locally. And that goes back to the Nomad shared login. And if Nomad shared login is enabled, then you're allowed to store it in a way that has the embedded password, and you don't get it prompted for the ID password all the time. That is considered the more secure way to store it and everything else like that. And that is used to get the ID file information every time you run Nomad and that kind of stuff. So that is kind of how the ID is secured once you get it. And the federated login is how you get the ID. So that they are different things. They're related because they're talking about the ID file, but the setups are different, and those are the different things. So just as a point of clarification to hopefully clarify that for people. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off of that a little bit and speak a little bit to mobile Nomad federated login. I mean, the main use case for Nomad federated login, especially from mobile contests, is that you're an admin and you don't want your end users to have to keep up with a Notes ID password. You want to bury the Notes ID password. It's a secure thing to do. It's a great decision to make. And so Nomad federated login allows you basically to have that ID downloaded securely to the client. And then, like Bob was saying with Nomad shared login, it then is encrypted and secured on the client. On mobile with Nomad shared login, when that is enabled, what will actually happen is you'll be prompted to biometrically authenticate. So biometrics will get enabled on that ID. So the next time you launch Nomad, you'll just have to use biometrics. And my final point there is that that's now supported on iOS, and that's something that we're working on Android. So that'll be coming soon. Support for that.
Yeah, I'll just add in, that's one of the very next things we're going to be looking at. And so I'm just going to do a little plug here for anybody who's interested in that on Android. We do an open beta. So if you just go to the Nomad listing in the Play Store, scroll down, there's a join the beta button, just tap that, and then you'll be in the beta program. And when we've got that ready for the beta, you'll be one of the first people to get it.
And I've been a part of that beta program, and I will say that I have been impressed with how what I have gotten actually has been very, it's not buggy. It's actually very fresh. It's working well for me, at least. So I appreciate that. And so for teeing up for the next question, and I want to make sure I'm reading Eunice, your question, and the question is, are there any templates that allow discussion databases React-like, and then parentheses Facebook or LinkedIn apps? I'm not exactly sure what you're trying to ask there, but I see that we're talking about the discussion database format to match up similar to Facebook and LinkedIn.
Sounds like
this might be a time for if you want to get clarity to that question, Eunice, if you would like to actually turn on your mic, we could do that and actually get a question live from the audience. And I'll tell you what, I'll come back to that because there's a little confusion on it. So Eunice, if you would like, post in the chat again, and I'll bring you back on and we'll let you actually ask your question to our panel.
Traveler is a great gateway for mobile. It provides good security and control. But could Nomad on mobile leverage Traveler, thereby avoiding the need for a VPN to connect?
Thank you. Yes, you have to ask the question, and you probably have the answer. Bob, go ahead.
Max, you want to answer that one? You want me to answer that one?
You've got it.
So I will answer that one then. Sure. So Traveler is really a separate synchronization technology that uses a protocol to exchange the data between the mobile device's data store and the Domino server. It is not really a network proxying technology or whatever else. It really is doing HTTP requests back and forth between the client and the server. So it's not really acting like a VPN. It doesn't make sense to be a VPN, and it would not support the nRPC because you really want to talk nRPC from the Nomad client to the server, and you really don't need, and in a sense, then Traveler is doing nRPC-esque operations, but over HTTP. I mean, it's not doing nRPC like Nomad is, but so it's really quite a different flow. if you are using some sort of VPN or network connectivity for Traveler, SafeLinks is very frequently used there. You could use that for the Nomad mobile clients as well, because the Nomad mobile clients will allow you to run an RPC directly. The web browser doesn't allow that, so we have to use the WSS. So the browser is only WSS wrapping the NRPC, but the mobile clients, both Android and iOS, allow NRPC directly. So if you are using the reverse proxy or any of the other SafeLinks features to front your Traveler server, you could potentially reuse that infrastructure setup to let your mobile clients for Nomad talk through that. But again, you could also run the SafeLinks with the Nomad WSS proxying on there as well and run everything through there. So you may be able to share some of the information or set up in your environment, but it really is not a match for a replacement or acting like a VPN. Hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you, Bob.
So I see two questions here. Any insight about Verse on-premise and Nomad coexistence?
Is that a
So
web browser question or a mobile
I
question?
think it's web, Nomad Web and Nomad and Verse Web, because they're saying Verse on-prem.
At this point, we have not seen a good use case for why you would need them to be integrated together, really. I mean, you're running in a browser, open up two tabs, one Verse in one tab, Nomad in the other, and run it in that way. Doug, did you want to say more to that?
sure. So in 115, we did do same time integration. So from Nomad, you can be logged in and see awareness of same time messages and initiate chats. So I'm imagining, and Tristan, if we can have some more feedback on it, that from Nomad you might want to use Verse as your mail choice. So when you're going to mail, it goes to Verse.
And Verse also has the same time integration as well, so that's already there.
But we can certainly say internally we've been looking at better integration between the two, and moving forward, that's certainly something on our radar. So the next question I see is, when will the share function in iOS be implemented?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. So share is there on Nomad for iOS. Right now, you are able to view attachments and share them from your documents in Nomad for iOS, so you can share them with any of the other applications that are willing to consume that file type. So that's in place. So I'm wondering if there's maybe a specific use case that was in mind here that I'm not quite sure what it is. So if you want to come back and fill in some more context there, I'm happy to revisit that.
Right. And just to let Gregor know, we got his questions. He had a couple about performance and some pick lists he doesn't. Feel free to open a support case. Anytime you have a performance issue or if there's something not working right, it's probably a great way to get our attention is to just open that support case and we'll look at it quickly. But he did have a good question about, can we make Nomad Mobile and Nomad Web more resilient when a server crash happens? I know we do support clustering and we try to do our best, but maybe there are certain instances where we don't fail over cleanly. Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, beyond.
I think we really probably need more details on what that's happening, because we are based on the same code base as the Notes client and stuff. So the replication and the failover in Nomad is pretty much the same as it is in the Notes client. So as long as the servers are there and the information is there, it should fail over the same. So that's another good one where
so maybe
would be very helpful.
Right. Maybe we can do a test rally, Bob, internally and with Maxx as well. And I can bring down or crash a few of the servers while we're accessing and see what it looks like. Problem is our Domino servers are so reliable, we don't get to validate it that much, but it's a fair point.
We do have internal problems that get open from our internal usage when the failover happens for the servers that PAX does take down. So we certainly do see it and we do try and address it and make sure that things are there. But oftentimes it is the same logic that's there for the Notes client. It has been for years. So we're trying not to break that either.
And one thing, Bob, to give you a pulse, isn't your Nomad web forum still available if people wanted to post any information there about or ask any questions there? It was part of early access way back when.
It is not there. Most of the feedback now is through the Sandbox forum.
Okay.
So the link that Anlin gave in the chat earlier to the Sandbox has the login, but there's also a way to provide feedback through that. So most of the other feedback has been coming through the Sandbox for the last couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you.
I will also, but let me add to that. There is also a hey-hcl at pnp-hcl.com, which is an email address that can be used for people to report issues and problems if they're giving general feedback. And that has been around for many years. It's used for many of the clients. So Verse Mobile uses it, Verse Traveler uses it, that kind of stuff. It's a generic email. It often will get you redirected to a person, which is good, but then we're most often going to have you open a support case as well. But that hey-hcl email, if people have run into it in their past, is still active and does get properly
Can we get
monitored and
that
responded
posted
to.
in the, let's get that
Yeah,
posted.
I'll put it in.
That's a very useful one. And so there's a couple of things I want to catch up here on. I have a question from Keith, and I see that Eunice is ready to get it. We can do the audio. By the way, do we have a poll question, Graham? Do we have a poll question? If you want to queue that up, and we'll come around to that. Let me get to the question from Keith. And that question is, what is the status of an MFA for Nomad since it doesn't work with Domino TOTP? Security question here. I'm betting Dan might jump in on that.
Yeah. So Domino TOTP will work if you configure Nomad with OIDC in 14.5 with the new provider that Dave Kern has been working on. The authentication config can be set up to require TOTP, and that will be handled with the IDP. In general, the TOTP really is used for logging in and stuff. So we would tell customers to configure their IDP provider to utilize that. The option is there for you in 14.5 with the new OIDC stuff, but we don't have a path for that with just basic authentication or the basic Notes ID unlock.
Great, thank you. Are there any templates that have been developed in Nomad similar to Facebook or LinkedIn format? So I think we're kind of looking at, like the old discussion database, but more on steroids, or perhaps something like connections might be what we're describing when we're talking about Facebook and LinkedIn. Interesting question. Any templates in general maybe that have been getting created that are?
I think it's a fair thing to put in the AHA of the types of templates you'd like to see. I mean, you can always look on OpenNTF that people are developing things that can be used. I'd certainly love something that looked like a Google space that I could use as opposed to a discussion database. But that's something you'll have to probably ask for in the AHA and have the product managers work with the template and design team to do those things. And I'm sure if they design them, these guys will make sure that they interact well on each of their devices.
Just
really good
point
points on it. Thank you for the call out for OpenNTF, because remember, that's what we are all about, is to provide that community of free templates and other code bits and things like that, not just having things like this open mic. And I think I heard Graham stepping in there. Graham, did you have something more to say now?
I was literally going to say what you said, but how about I launch the poll question?
All right, the poll question is coming up for us. Right now, there you go. Which type of Nomad deployment are you currently using?
While folks are answering this, I just want to follow up on the answer that I gave about the MFA and TOTP. Dave Kern reached out during the call and encouraged us to also state that passkey support can be enabled instead, which is a very good new technology that people should look into leveraging.
Yes, and that came up in the other session, the other webinar that you guys had. And I think I heard something else you mentioned in that answer to the TOTP, and that was 14.5, meaning it's right, it's almost here, not quite. When we get
right, and I believe many of these features are available in the most recent early access drop that we've shipped.
So Keith, you might take a look at that and test it out, as I know you are really good at getting in and doing the early release things. All right, we're watching as our poll gets bounced around here. We got 53% of the people have voted. Please don't hesitate to vote.
Hey, Jeremy, while we're waiting on this poll, you want to say some of the cool things you're working on that are near term?
Yeah, sure. So did already mention Nomad Federated Login is coming. After that, this last year, we've really focused on a lot of mobile redesign, especially around the switching between applications. So we've got some more improvements there that are going to be coming in. We're also looking a little bit further out. We're looking at integrating some pinch to zoom support, which will really help get you zoomed in on those applications that just don't quite fit right on mobile. So yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming.
Excellent. Well, by the way, I just want to say that I love this format, this forum, because we're getting so many answers to these questions that you never really know where to ask. And so thank you all for coming to this. Know that we do this as a series. We're opening this up to doing this as a series on a monthly basis, that we have these open mic conversations. And I appreciate all of you from HCL who are helping to put this together, and you're willing to get online and be a part of this for us, because clearly by the questions we're getting and everybody in the comments that I'm seeing, this is a great value. So I'm looking forward to continuing this. And by the way, what would an open mic session be without actually opening a mic? So if I could, Graham or Roberto, if one of you could turn on Eunice's mic, he's ready to get that working to actually ask the question, like verbally.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead and ask your question. And tell us, finally, first, tell us where you're from, because I like to hear where this is. Where are you from? And then ask your question.
I'm from the UK. I've been following this for quite a few months, and I'm from Yorkshire, so I work for a company in Yorkshire that uses Domino at the moment. And I just, me personally, I'm a developer at the company, and we develop applications, browser-based applications and so on. So my question really, again, it could be a fairly mundane question, is obviously we're going towards mobile applications a lot, and I was just trying to figure out if there's any appetite or any development that is going around developing, taking the discussion database and as you said, David, like connections, or I'm talking about LinkedIn, so they've got that kind of format available. I think, in the business these days, those kind of things would be quite useful. It tends to, certainly in the businesses, the business that I'm working in, they seem to like that kind of format. So I was just wondering whether would that have to be done by the developer themselves to develop that type of application, or is there any specific templates that are available, or has anybody thought of doing anything like that?
Yeah, so I understand the question. So, your Domino applications, they've been mobilized. And so now the question is, how do we modernize them, right? So we, ACL, we don't ship any template that has features like or dislike for records or post. But I recall the Total Partnership, I thought they published a template that does just this, maybe as on OpenNTF. I'm trying to look for it. But a couple of years ago, they did an experiment saying, how can we modernize a Domino application? And they actually modernized the discussions database, and they actually implemented these features like liking and disliking different code. And so I'm just going to find that. It's probably somewhere, but that's the only thing that I can refer you to. HCL, we haven't shipped anything to provide that.
But again, the same thing is to ask on AHA, create the things of what you'd like to see, and let the product managers look at it. I mean, Max and the teams are able to provide newer design elements to do certain things. The photo integration was something. I think you had the geolocation was new, and there's other things that would make sense for phones or tablets, or even in the web, Nomad web, of design elements that you guys think would be beneficial. So come forward with those ideas and say, as an app developer, if you could add this, I could write this crazy app where I could show up. People had talked about policemen showing up at an accident and taking pictures and immediately downloading into this accident app on Domino, and it'll have time dates and all those things. Perfect, right? Perfect use, many use cases, and you have the background security and ease of use of Domino and the sharing and all of that stuff. So it's absolutely essential to ask, even about apps, in Domino AHA, that it would be great if you could give us a starting point as a template to be able to do something like this. So great suggestion.
Thank you, John. And by the way, I see how we keep coming back to AHA. You guys are doing a really good job of paying attention to what is brought up there. So that is as the end user's way of getting that out in front of them where you guys can see and look at what it is we're asking for. I have a question from Tristan. He gives a bit of an upfront scenario for the why of the question, but in the end, the question is, are there any plans for single sign-on between Verse in Nomad, or even an option in Nomad for users to launch directly to Verse? So we're looking for a single sign-on question here.
Yeah, so I took a stab at answering that because I didn't know if this was just going to get lost. You can configure SSO between Verse and Nomad, especially if you use SAML or OIDC. Again, Domino 14.5 will have an OIDC provider natively. Regarding placing a link in to Verse in Nomad, you can configure the application switcher. There's a way to put a link to Verse in the Nomad environment, and I believe Verse has the same capability. The chat has the link, but I also answered the question directly with the link.
Great, thank you. And just the beauty of asking these questions, I assure you, for anybody who's asking that question, there are probably 5 or 6 other people out there that have a similar question that's related. So the answer is very beneficial when we hear it online, when we hear it out loud. All right, now, because I'm getting so many comments in the thread here, I'm looking for which one is actually a question versus a comment. I appreciate that. Here we go. I've got one from Theo. Great to chat with you, Theo. The question is, swipe left and right was added in the Notes Designer a long time ago, but it never implemented in the mobile client. Is that coming up?
So Annalyn's on the call, who's our product manager. She can take this if she wants to, otherwise I'll speak to it. So yes, Theo, you're totally right. That has been in Designer for quite some time. That is a feature that will help you modernize your Domino applications, and it's something that we do plan on doing. So it is in the backlog, and so you can expect it at some point in the future.
And before we miss out, Bob, I just want to give a shout out that Bob's going to be at Engage this year for any of you planning to be there. Maybe some of these other developers will also be there. But that's another great conference for any of you who happen to be able to attend to keep pressing forward your needs and learn quite a bit while you're there.
What platforms do you primarily use HCL Nomad on? And select all that apply. I like this because I actually use all of them. Where half of us have voted so far, keep the votes coming in. And while you're doing that, I'm looking to see if I have missed any questions.
So there was one from Gregor who said, do developers use Nomad Mobile in production for any real applications? Could you give an example?
Thank you. Do we have an answer to that? That's one of those where it's like, well, we'd have to do a poll to actually get the answer to that.
Max, do you want to? I'll go. Yeah, I mean, we've got a handful of applications.
So before we run away from that, I'm going to, because our poll, I believe we've concluded our poll. Is that correct, Graham? So we're
sorry, I jumped over you there. Sorry, Jeremy.
No worries, no worries. So just to show off the results there, we've got desktop browser is definitely the lead, but all of them are getting pretty heavily used. There aren't much that fall off of that. Perhaps Android, but that's because you're either iOS or Android, and if you look at the numbers, it's kind of a one or the other. So I'm one of those odd people out in that I have both. All right, let's move on from our poll question, and now I'll let you finish out what you were going to respond, please.
Sure. Yeah. So I was just going to say we've got a team room that we use for internal development discussions. That's an active one. We've got an out-of-office database we use for vacation scheduling. We do device tracking with all the mobile devices that we pass around. We've got a database for that. So yeah, we've got a bunch that we use internally.
Oh, you shouldn't have told me that, because now you know what I'm going to ask for, Jeremy.
Actually, I think the question was more around the amount of use of Domino Designer in Nomad.
the designer.
Be more a matter of support cases and knowing if there's a adoption of Domino Designer in Nomad.
I think that might have been a different question.
Right.
Apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so he was saying specifically like which applications, like do overusing applications in production on Nomad Mobile. And so yeah, the answer is yes, of course. I mean, everyone on this call uses Nomad Mobile. When you're busy, it's good to be able to work when you're on the go. Check your mail before you go to bed and make sure everything looks right. And Nomad Mobile is certainly what I use to do all of that.
I believe the question had to do with the designer.
Let me add my 2 cents to this.
Please, John, clarify.
When Nomad first came out and I was sitting at my kid's basketball practice watching him, and an issue came up and I had to go into the NAB as an admin and fix something that was pretty simple. I didn't have to run back to my laptop in my house. I got on Nomad and opened up the NAB and made a real quick edit. And I was like ecstatic that they had provided me with that simple capability. And that's just a simple use case as an admin to be able to get into your NAB and make changes, from Nomad Mobile.
I appreciate that, John, because that's exactly what I've used my iPad for the same, almost exact same issue. So, and Jeremy, you mentioned, we have all these internal apps that we use. Just curious, is there any chance that some of those apps might find their way as templates in the general release that we could have to build on and grow on? And because I'll bet that the things you're using Notes for to do that are the same problems that we all are experiencing, looking for the same kind of solution.
Yep.
And I don't expect you to have the answer to that, but maybe somebody here could share.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and yeah, we can definitely look at surfacing some of those.
Excellent. And if nothing else, feel free to push them over to OpenNTF, and we will be happy to host them. All right.
David,
Do I have another question?
I think Gregor wanted to clarify his question. He raised his hand.
Would we like to
there is no, Gregor raised his hand because he made a clarification on the question. He says, no, I mean use of application, because if some of the developer use the app, what is annoying would be fixed fast.
Yeah, and that might be where, as developers, we know how to get around something. So if you have a specific use case, something that is really infringing on your ability to use your Domino applications on Nomad Mobile, please use the support process. We want to solve them.
Yes, again, the support process, making a support call for a lot of these specific issues that you have, and also for those things we want to get, obviously, AHA is the other place that we go to get this is great because this surfaces those issues, both to help bring more awareness to what is being posted in either of those sources, and it gets us all thinking about other ideas that you might end up coming with a follow-up question or a related question.
There was a follow-up, and I think Roberto reposted some of the information. So in the designer in Nomad for web browsers, there is a preview function. And so you can preview what your app is going to look like. And it includes some built-in form factors for the mobile devices, but you can also define your own. So if you want to have bigger devices, small devices, you can define your own and look at that. So you can certainly use that to help design your apps to have the different renderings based on the form factors and everything else like that, using the app formula logic and the other things that other people in my panelists have mentioned. But just be aware that that preview function is there so that you can look at what it's going to look like, not only in your Notes client or your web browser client, but also in the mobile clients with different form factors and portrait and landscape and that kind of stuff. So it is a useful feature for doing that, and that is relatively new.
Yeah, and that will even honor your hide wins and like the specific things that you've done in the application to make it more mobile friendly. So that's a great new feature.
Excellent. All right, looking in here, I'm not getting, I do have a fresh question here from Mark. This is the first time I heard of Designer for Nomad. Is that Domino Designer running in a web browser basically, or is it Designer for Nomad? Good question on clarity here. And by the way, if you haven't, be sure to go back and watch the replay from what they posted last month on Nomad. That's a session which will give you a little insight into this question. And but still, I'm gonna let our panel to answer this question. So,
Yeah,
Domino Designer in it or for it?
It's in it. So it's the basic designer running as a capability within Nomad. And with our 1.15 release, it'll be supported in all the languages we have as well. To get to that point, there was some work we needed to do. One of the important things that designer needs, and you also need in the client as well, is infobox support. So we kind of reimagined that as a property panel to the right that surfaces what you would normally see, what you see in an infobox. And that really was a kind of a prerequisite for us to be able to surface designer. So it took us a bit of technical work to get there, but we released that over a year ago.
Oh, and we've got a screen share coming up.
And
so Bob,
I can show you just real quick. So you
Go
can
for it.
open it up and you can just say, all right, so this is my local names NSF. I can just say open up in designer, and then you get the designer view that you're used to from the basic client, and you can open up forms or pages, and you can look at things, and you can do all the regular things that you need to in here. So it is running in Nomad, not necessarily for Nomad, because the application changes that you make, wherever you view the application, be it in Notes or in Nomad, will be applicable, but you can use it with the different form factors there. So this is more just an example of what it looks like.
And Bob, you want to open the properties panel? Option return.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay.
So most of this stuff was done through the properties panel. So all of the settings have been moved over here into these different aspects, of course, but this is similar to the info box before. So you can also look at the form layer, you can look at the form parts, you can look at the database itself, and that kind of stuff. So this applies for regular databases as well, but it's highly used here in Designer because that is the way the Designer written basic was written. So they're all over here.
And if I could point a little detail out here, which people might be overlooking, by the traffic light in the top left corner, we're working with a Mac in the Designer client. So for those, because I remember every year it would come up in the Q&A at the end of Lotus Sphere or any of those, when are you going to have Designer on Mac? Right? Am I missing something here? So
you're
this
absolutely
is really
correct.
cool.
So this is your way to run Designer or to get to some of your admin stuff on a Mac as well. But
yeah,
so this is running on my Mac.
Thank you, Bob. So yes, it's not Safari, but it is Chrome. So next question. Thanks for that share, by the way. That was a visual that really helps. A lot of times clarifies things that would take 1,000 words.
So I see Mark Gilbert just posted a question about figuring out a way from Nomad to go into full access admin mode. Certainly something you could put in the Domino AHA idea. I know what you're getting at, that, obviously if you're properly configured, you'd have your admin rights and you do things. But on occasion, you do, if you are configured as a full access admin, you'd like to get elevated privileges and just get in to do some work that you need to fix things. So I hear what you're saying. Best to post that as a Domino AHA idea and get other admins to vote it up.
Thank you for
helping. The thing I would add to that is that the goal has been to move a lot of the administration into the new administration application, which is just an NSF, and then you can run it anywhere, including in the Nomad.
Well, this would be like you wanted to open any database, Bob, like IDPCAT or some other.
Correct. I understand. There are certain limitations.
Right. You want to escalate yourself.
Go ahead. But as far as having a full Nomad administrator version, like we have the Nomad Designer now, there's no really plans to do that at this point. Administrative functions will be exposed as possible.
That wouldn't be a bad idea either. But to just operate on any given database and escalate your admin through full access admin is something that we can't do yet from Nomad Web or Nomad Mobile. It might be something we could look into.
Excellent. As we approach the end of the time that we had allocated for this, and we also are, I'm not seeing any new questions, which is still okay. That we've actually gotten through quite a few questions. I've been pleasantly surprised with how many we've achieved. I feel smarter today. So if nobody else walks away with something, I at least feel like I've learned a good bit out of this. I'll probably even go back and rewatch this just to get more out of the content. I wanted to bring this back full circle and ask just a few final questions here on you guys. If there are any things that you wanted to share before we call it a close that we didn't get to cover, that were you see as the panelists, you see in your day-to-day job, is there anything else standing out that you wanted to make sure we knew before we end? And it's okay if you don't.
I had one topic. I'll share my screen because I've got a visual.
Bring it up. Thanks, Max.
Sure. So one of the things that we've mentioned, and I just kind of want to highlight, is that Nomad Mobile is a little bit different from Nomad for Web in that we are able to connect like a Notes client directly to your Domino server using an NRPC, but we can also connect through a Nomad server. So if you're configuring Nomad for mobile, the very first client setup dialog that you're going to see here, that's that direct connection to Domino. So this is where you put in your name, the server address, and you connect to that Domino server. Hopefully it's vaulted, you download the ID vault, you're good to go. If you want to connect through a Nomad server, you just have to press proxy setup on that dialog, and that's going to take you to the Nomad proxy setup configuration dialog. This is where you put in the server address of the Nomad server that you're configuring through. We do see some confusion around this. Some customers don't realize that this is an alternate way of configuring that's available in the client. So I just kind of wanted to highlight it here.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, I will say that every one of these we've gotten better and better at. Every time we've had one of these open mic sessions. Thank you, HCL, for being willing to step in and work with us at OpenNTF to have this presentation for our audience, because I think we share the same audience in many ways. And I wanted to remind you all that I think what makes this so vital is not the panelists just alone, but that we have a good audience asking great questions. Remember that if you ask your questions in advance, they'll have a chance to do a little background and give you a deeper answer, which is really what we're all after. We're not after trying to hang anybody out to dry. We're here to really get some good answers. So if one of my cohorts on the board could share that email address for next month and our future questions that we have when we have the next open mic. I don't think we have scheduled what the next open mic is, but it would be the 4th Thursday of the month. There it is. Thank you, Graham. Open mic at openntf.org. If you would send your questions to that, and of course you need to know what the topic is, but I'll even throw this out here, and no one was anticipating this, but if there are questions that you have that you aren't necessarily specific to any of this, but might be things that you wanted to see us get as panels, please share those. We're always looking for ideas on what our panels would be and the next open mic, and we're going to continue to repeat these processes for as long as HCL will tolerate us. And I think Graham and Roberto, are there any things that I am missing out on? I'm sure I'm forgetting something, and that's kind of the beauty of this, as it's a moving target. Are there any things that we wanted to bring up?
Just that I've updated the share page to the Discord server, the OpenNTF Discord server link, which I know that some of the HCL developers are active in, and in fact, very specifically, some of the topics that HCL is looking for feedback for is through our Discord server. So if you're not there yet, please do use the links there and register. It is active forums on all kinds of different topics for all of the different HCL products, and it's the place to get your questions answered even faster.
Excellent. Thank you, Graham. And I'll point out, OpenNTF, we are able to bring these to you only because we are a collection of volunteers like everybody else, just stepping up to the plate and making things like this happen. If you enjoyed this, feel free to reach out and say, yeah, you know what, I'd like to help out, because the board would definitely be able to put you to good use as far as having your skills and your time, because it doesn't happen automatically. None of this is easy to produce. There are a lot of activities that go on behind the scenes to actually bring everybody together and to make this happen. So, one, thank you, OpenNTF board members, and two, any of you out there who would like to join in and help contribute, we'd love to hear from you. And if nothing else, you can send it to that open mic, and we'll get your questions or your volunteerisms there. Without any other things that I have, I think that we've come to the end of an hour and a half of really useful information, meeting on Nomad Web and Nomad apps. I've enjoyed this, and unless there's anything else, I'm going to say we'll call it a day. Thank you, everybody.